Hey, you asked for it, you got it. And we're not talking about Toyota. Today, I'm going to answer some questions that seem to be popping up in our client meetings and over the phone in the past few weeks. And I want to try to give you some answers because if we're seeing the same question more than one time from people who are actually raising their hand, calling in, coming in to see us, our assumption is that more of you are asking the same questions. Hey, welcome to the Ease into Retirement podcast. I'm Tom Mosley, your host. And if you'll give me 15 minutes, I'll do my best to increase your financial knowledge. Thanks for all the responses that we've had and the comments that we've had about our podcast as we, over the past 7 weeks, have gone through the financial retirement house, and we talked about income for a couple of weeks, and then we talked about inflation, investments, taxes, healthcare, and then legacy last week. This week, as I said, we're going to talk about some questions that seem to have popped up often in our client meetings and in phone calls that we've gotten. And just jump right in. I'm going to jump right in. If you like our podcast, if there's something that we talk about on here, share it with somebody else, please. And let them know that the podcast is out there. It's free of charge to anyone who wants to listen to it and who wants to learn from it. And if you have questions, and we always ask you at the end of the time, if you have questions, call them in to us or email me, Tom at easeintoretirement.com, or you can call us and leave the question at 714-421-4288, and I'll be more than happy to answer your question as we periodically have these questions from the client meetings is what we'll call them. Number one question. Here we go. You ready? We've had a couple of people ask recently, can I take my RMDs and put them into a Roth IRA? All right, very good question. Let's break it down and explain what we're talking about. When we're talking about RMDs, we're talking about required, that's the R, minimum, that's the M, distribution, that's the D. RMDs that come out of an IRA or they come out of a 401k. Now, or a 403b or a 457. Anytime you reach the age of 72, you have to start taking required minimum distributions. And there's a certain schedule. It's not a percentage. It's a schedule based on life expectancy. And the percentage actually goes up every year. And you begin to need to take out required minimum distributions. So the question is, if I don't really need it because before you reach the age of 72, you've got enough solid income coming in maybe from a pension or from your Social Security, which are two great annuities, or maybe you've got another annuity that we've turned on and you've got all of the income you need. Maybe rental property goes into that. And you say, now I'm 72, I don't really need my required minimum distribution. In essence, you're saying, what do I do with them when I get out? Can I put them in a Roth? Now, what is a Roth? R-O-T-H. A Roth is a particular kind of IRA where you pay the tax on the money before it goes in, and it comes from earned income. You put the money into the Roth IRA, and you don't have to pay the tax as it grows. You don't have to pay the tax, any tax at all, when the money comes out of the Roth in your lifetime. If you're married and you leave it to a spouse, you can leave it over to your spouse, and he or she does not have to pay any tax on that Roth in their lifetime. And then if both of you pass away and you leave it to your children, they've got a time schedule as to how soon they've got to take it out, but there's no tax involved in any money that comes out of a Roth if it's taken out in the proper ways. There are a couple of little rules. I don't even want to go into them. We can talk about it privately if you're really interested in a Roth. But the question was, can I take my RMDs, required minimum distributions, because I'm 72, that they're requiring me to take out, and can I turn around and put those into a Roth IRA? Well, the simple answer, the straightforward answer is no. Here's why. The only thing that can go into a Roth is either a conversion from an IRA that's not RMD related, where you take the money that's in the IRA, you convert it over into the Roth, pay the tax on it, but it's not required minimum distribution. It's a conversion that you've chosen. A lot of our clients, when they retire and say they're 66 years of age, we are working with them systematically over a period of time doing tax harvesting, where they are converting money out of a regular IRA or a 401k, and we're moving a bit of that money every year over into a Roth. Okay? Not required minimum distribution. The way a required minimum distribution is set up by the government is they want you to have to take that money out, pay the tax on it, and now it's after tax money. You say, yeah, why can't I put that into a Roth? Because in probably 98% of the time, you don't have any earned income. And so to put money into a Roth IRA, either you or your spouse has to have earned income that year for you to make a contribution, not a conversion, but a contribution to a Roth. So the money that comes out of the 401k or the IRA as a required minimum distribution does not count as earned income. Oh, it'll be taxed as regular income, but it doesn't count as earned income and therefore is not eligible to go in to a Roth as a required minimum distribution. Now, that should drive home to you the point that it's all the more important that if you're wanting to take money out of an IRA or a 401k and you don't need it, you really need to start that process with us of tax harvesting, where we're taking money out of that thing before you have to at 72, and you're converting a little chunk of it every single time, depending on your tax bracket and depending on where you are. You say, should everybody tax harvest? Hey, wait a minute. You know my saying, the information on this program is never meant specifically for you to be tax, legal, or investment advice. You need to let us analyze your situation specifically, or let your financial advisor or a financial advisor go through and analyze your particular situation before you jump and do something.
Hey folks, thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ease into Retirement podcast with Tom Mosley. Just a quick reminder that if anything you've heard so far today has hit home for you, maybe it's something you're dealing with, maybe it's just something you want to learn a little bit more about, there will be a complimentary downloadable giveaway on Tom's website specifically prepared for this week's episode that you should check out. Just go to easepodcast.com. That's EASE podcast.com. Click the button with the title of this week's episode and get your copy today. Now I'll throw it back to Tom.
So, simple question, can I take RMDs and put them into a Roth IRA? You can't put RMDs into a Roth IRA. You can put conversions, but those RMDs that come out of an IRA or a 401k go into an after-tax account. Question number 2, we've heard this a couple of times recently. I just sold my house, Tom. Can I put that money into a Roth IRA? And again, the simple answer is no. Now let's talk about it. You sold your house. Let's say let me just give you some numbers. Let's say you sold your house and your capital gains on that house. Let's forget about the exclusions, and if you're married, the double exclusion. But let's just say at the end of the time you sold your house, you are going to be taxed for capital gains on $500,000. So let's say it's a 20%, just to say something. It could be 20 now, it could be more later, it could be a little bit less now, but just for the sake of simplicity, let's say your capital gains was $500,000 and your tax was $100,000, so you got $400,000 left. What do I do with that? Well, the good news about that $400,000 is as of the day you pay your tax on the capital gains, boom, all of that money that very instant is not You owe no tax on that because you just paid it when you paid the capital gains tax. Normally, that money would go into a non-qualified plan. That means that money that's in there, the basis of it, the amount of money that you put in there has already been taxed. Now, just like it was in the first question about RMDs going into a Roth, if you have earned income in a year, or if your spouse has earned income in a year, you can contribute to a Roth up to a maximum of $7,000 if you're over 50 or $6,000 if you're under 50, given that you fit income parameters. And again, it's too technical to get into, but there's some income limits to contributing to a Roth. But what we're asking is, can I take that big pot of money that I got from the sale of my house and just slap that into a Roth so it'll grow tax-free? The answer is no, because that's not earned income, that's capital gain. And all of that money, by the way, has already been taxed anyway, but that should go into an after-tax non-qualified account. Now, how am I going to get taxed on that, Tom? You're going to get taxed on that after-tax non-qualified account as that $400,000 that we talked about in the illustration begins to grow and you begin to sell the assets out of there. Then you're going to have capital gains. Then you're going to get a 1099 on the growth, not the basis, but the growth. So quick answer, I just sold my house, Tom. Can I put that money in a Roth IRA? Simple answer is no. All right, question number 3, and we're done. Say, I'm still working, Tom. I'm 73, and pretty much all the money I've got saved is in my 401k. But I really would like to work with you. Can I do a rollover with an in-service distribution even though I'm still working? Something that's legal. Can I roll that money over into an IRA and start to work with you with that money? Well, let me give you this one. The answer is yes, you can, but the answer is no, you probably don't want to. Here's what I mean. Most people, when you're still working, if you're still working out there and you've got your 401k and you're over 59 and a half, most of you are eligible, and you'd have to check with your human resources department for what's called an in-service distribution. You're still in service to that company. You're over 59 and a half, so you're going to be able to take some money out of your 401k and get a retirement plan established like we do with many of our clients through the years. Okay? So you can do it. But if you're here's why you probably don't want to. The person that asked me this question was 73. Okay, they were over RMD age level. They were putting all of their money was in a 401k, and they were continuing to contribute as they were working to that 401k. Here's a rule that you might not know. If your money at 72 is in one or more IRAs, then you have to start taking money out whether you're working or not. But if your money for retirement is in a 401k with the company where you're still employed, then you don't have to start taking required minimum distributions out until the year that you do retire. So if that person, I know it's well-meaning and I really appreciate the thought and I'd love to work with them, but if they rolled some or all of that money out of the 401k while they were still working and they put it in an IRA, they would begin immediately to have to pay required minimum distributions because they're over the age of 72 and their money would then be in an IRA. But because they're 73 still working and the money's in a 401k at the company where they are still working, that money can just continue to grow and they're not subject to required minimum distributions until the year in which they retire. So although, the Apostle Paul said one time, he said, I can do anything I want, but it's better for me not to. This is one of those situations. You can generally move that money out of a 401k in an in-service distribution if you're over 59 and a half, but you probably don't want to because then there'll be extra money at a higher tax bracket than when this lady retires in a few years, that there'll be extra money that she'll have and she'll have to pay tax on it now. Hey, Think about that in-service distribution, though, because if you're still working and you're going to wait till you retire and then, boom, start all of your retirement plan, it may make a lot of sense for you to go ahead and get some of those pieces in place now by doing an in-service distribution out of your active 401k with part of that money so that you can get your income adjusted for inflation, your investments set the right way, you can start working on your taxes, and you can really start building that financial retirement house that we talked about in our previous 7 podcasts. Hey, thanks for listening to me today. If you liked something, let us know. If you like something that somebody needs to know about, share the podcast with them. And let us know if you have any questions, because every 4 or 5 weeks we plan on having one of these mailbags where we answer questions from our client meetings and questions from our client phone calls so that we can answer your questions even before you ask them. So until next time, this is the Ease into Retirement podcast. I'm Tom Mosley, your host. If you'll give me 15 minutes, I'll do my best to build your financial knowledge week by week.
Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AE Wealth Management and Mosley Insurance and Financial Services are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Mosley Insurance and Financial Services is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Mosley Insurance and Financial Services. Ed Slott's IRA Advisor Group is a paid membership educational organization comprised of professionals of varying credentials. Membership in this organization does not imply a set level of skill or training. The logo and/or service mark is the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement of Tom Mosley is stated or implied.
A Roth conversion is a taxable event and may have several tax-related consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.